Leaders sometimes have difficulty really relying on their teams. Now, I think this is largely because they don't appreciate the difference between doers and leaders. Doers and leaders. Those of you that are leaders here today, I'll bet that at some point you were a great doer. Right? You were in some position where you had mad technical skills, you were able to accomplish things, and in fact, it was your ability to roll up your sleeves and get this job done personally that distinguished you and gave you the opportunity to step up into leadership, right? But some of you may have discovered that once you're in a position of leadership, some of those dispositions and habits that distinguished you most as a doer don't serve you as well now that you're in a leadership role. Right? In fact, some of them might even be liabilities. Now, that's because leaders and doers are very different. It's a very different role. Let me illustrate this in part by talking about the perspective that a leader and a doer has. A doer's perspective looks something like this. You can see here that she's a great doer. She's got her eye on the prize, right? In this case, she's focused on building Sunday, making it happen for the people that are coming. And I mean, that's what she is focusing on like a laser. And she's willing to do whatever it takes to get that job done and to do it great. Now, some of you can relate to this, right? This is your perspective. This has been your perspective. And this is a great perspective for doers because doers have to be focused on the outcome and willing to just get in there and make it happen, to do whatever it takes. They'll get whatever knowledge they need. They'll be willing to work as long as it takes. They'll do whatever it takes to get the job done. Now, this is a great perspective for a doer, but this isn't such a great perspective for a leader. And when you become a leader, if you're looking at this sort of end outcome and you're focusing on that, you may find that you've got one particular problem because when you're a leader, you've got this other element in the system. It's called your team. Right? The men and women that you lead. And if you're not careful, if you fail to adjust your perspective from being a doer to a leader, these people can suddenly be impediments, barriers, complications between you and the job you're trying to get done. Right? Now, to fix that, you have to change your perspective. You have to actually look past them because doers are known by their direct impact on outcomes. But leaders are known by their indirect impact on outcomes. In other words, when the smoke clears, the outcome, the results are going to have the doer's fingerprints all over it. But as a leader, especially a 4U leader, your fingerprints, your mark will be on the doers. So that means a leader's perspective has to shift and look a little more like this. Instead of focusing only on the outcome, you've got to think of your team. And that means you have to think differently about how you manage power. When I talk about relying more on the people that you lead and serve, I'm really talking about adjusting your ideas of power. When you're a doer, you want to amass as much power as possible, right? You want the expertise, the knowledge, the influence, because you need that in order to get the job done. But if you're a leader, it's about giving these things away. It's not about you being more powerful, it's about you making others more powerful. It's not about you having influence, it's about you helping your team have more influence. It's not about what you can do and accomplish, it's about what you can equip them to do and accomplish. Right? Some of you are thinking about this and you realize, wow, that's really tough. I don't have the luxury, frankly, of being just a leader or just a doer. Your job is sort of that of a player coach, right? You do a little bit of each thing, and I get that. I don't want to try to oversimplify the position that you're in. But in my experience, if leaders don't at least conceive of doers and leaders differently and think of those roles very differently, they can wind up confusing and competing with the people they lead. If you're going to be a 4U leader, you have to think about, well, how do I go about giving things away? How do I make them more powerful? And this can be really difficult. I found that it was really difficult myself in an experience that I had as the dean of students. I was at a university and we were preparing this big proposal. We were going to do this really big presentation to all the major leaders of the school. It was a big deal. We'd been working on it for several weeks. And on the day before we were going to make this big presentation, we discovered a flaw in it, a mistake. Now, this is one of those kinds of mistakes that, you know this feeling, right? When you discover it, you kind of secretly wish you had never noticed it until it was too late, right? Because it was a big mistake. It was a flaw in the underlying assumptions, and we realized that we were going to have to scrap the whole proposal and redo it in just less than 24 hours. Now, I was really thinking, oh, all right, I get this, it needs to be done. I was rolling up my sleeves figuratively. I was about to pick up the phone and call my wife and say, look, I'm not going to be home tonight. This is a big deal. It's going to require all night to redo this sort of thing, and I got to get busy. About the time that I went to pick up the phone, one of the team leads came into my office, and she said, okay, we've rescheduled everybody. They're going to stay through the night. We're going to work all night. We've got this. And I thought to myself, oh, this is one of those gut check moments. Am I thinking like a doer, or am I thinking like a leader? I got to tell you, all the instincts in me made me want to go grapple with the problem, to get busy myself. But if I did that, I was going to inadvertently steal the power from my team. And I realized this was one of those moments that I needed to put them in a place to address it, and I needed to step away. If I wanted them to step up and take care of business, maybe the most important thing I could do would be to step back and take care of them. So I did. At the end of the day, I went and picked up all my things, packed up, and started to walk out. Here's my team all working. Everybody's still at their desks. I mean, they're going to be there all night long. And this is one of the longest walks I've ever taken, going to my car and leaving my team there working like mad. But that was the best thing to do because they needed to be in a position to step up and take charge. Some of you have been in that spot before, right? There's been a time back when you were a doer where somebody needed you to do something extraordinary, to make some extravagant commitment of your time, your attention, your talents, and it was going to take a lot out of you. So you stayed late, you worked longer, you did whatever it took, and it was really hard, right? But honestly, some of those moments, haven't they kind of changed now to be in your own sort of personal hall of fame? They're like your own awards, your badges of honor that you remember, because it felt heroic to be able to at least have the ability to do what it took, right? Let me suggest to you that those moments still exist, those moments where somebody has to stand up and do something heroic. It's just that if you're a leader, those aren't your moments anymore. Those are your team's moments. And you got to give them the chance to step up, give them the chance to be a hero. I know it feels like you're doing something really important when you realize the outcome is in danger and you step in to do it yourself. But if you're not careful, you'll steal their opportunity to be the hero. Right? Well, that's kind of what I was thinking as I'm walking to my car that night, and I felt like this was a really difficult decision, because as I'm walking to the car, every bit of my inner doer was rising up in me going, wait a minute, you got to get in there. You can't just walk off and leave people working here. And I'd like to tell you that I was doing this because I'm so wise and I understand the difference between doing and leading and all of that. But the truth is that when that team lead walked into my office and she looked into my eyes and she said, "We got this," there was something in the way she said that also said, "And we don't need you here all up in our business." Right? So however I got the point, I did the right thing. I walked off. I walked away. Now some of you are also thinking, wait a minute, what kind of discussion of leadership is this? Aren't leaders supposed to model the way? Shouldn't you as a leader be showing people what it means to be committed and to do whatever it takes? And I would tell you, yes, it's important for you to model those things, but the way you show your commitment, the way you demonstrate that you're all in about getting things done and doing it right is different in a position of leadership than it is in a position of doing. And when you're in a position of leadership, it's not about you grabbing a hold of the outcome and trying to wrestle it into shape. It's about you lifting up your people and preparing them to do it. So I'll tell you, I came back to the office. I couldn't stand it. It got to be about midnight, and I came back to the office. But I'll tell you, I didn't come back to fix things. I didn't come back to get busy myself. I came back carrying the biggest stack of pizzas that I could carry. Because this is the best contribution I could make as a leader. Remember, if you want people to step up and take care of business, then sometimes the best thing you can do is to step back and take care of them. So I showed up with pizzas. I patted backs, I said attaboy, attagirl as much as I could. I did everything I could not to critique what was happening and get in there myself. right? And after about 45 minutes or so, I left again. I went home and went to bed, leaving them to work through the rest of the night. And when I came in the next morning, it was obvious that this had taken a toll. I had one exhausted team. I had people still sort of lying on their desks. Some had slept there, some had not slept at all. I mean, it was a tough night. But if I looked closely, I could see they were also kind of walking tall. Right? They'd been the hero. They'd done whatever it took. And this was one strong team, one team that felt like they were potent and able to do what it took, because at least in that moment, I had the good sense to step back instead of being a doer myself. This is the first adjustment that you might make. To be a 4U leader, it's tough, but you've got to set some of those doer dispositions aside and recognize that when you're a leader, you have a different perspective on this, and that your focus is on your team, not purely on the outcome. You have to think differently about how you manage power, and rather than accumulating itself, you've got to go out of your way to give it away.